Builders are probably one of the most important resources that we use in developments. However, there tends to be a very much love-hate relationship between property developers and the builders. Why do you think that is?
Developers, they're renowned for trying to knock builders down. I know, for instance, I priced a job for you before.
I don't know if we want to talk about that price, do we? How do you think you can best mitigate having to pay a lot of fees when it comes to variations?
I think...
And we are back for another episode of the PBK podcast. Each and every week we bring you a special guest. Today we've got Joe Todd. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you for having me. Liking the setup here.
Come on. We have to get stuff to a higher standard. Now, look, I don't want to start the booze too early, but Joe is, for want of a better word, he's in the building trade. I know it's property developers.
I'm on the bad side.
We get a lot of booze because builders are probably like, we need you so much. Yeah. We need you all the time. We need you to complete projects. Like, you are probably one of the most important resources that we use in developments. However, there tends to be a very much love-hate relationship between property developers and the builders. Why do you think that is?
I think it all comes down to relationships, right? So I think a lot of people just go out there and trying to find the local builder. Developers, they're renowned for trying to knock builders down. Do you know what I mean? They want to obviously maximize their profit. In the building game, you want to maximize your profit. And it's not just about the profit, it's about de-risking yourself, right? So I think we spoke about this the other week. Is if you have a good relationship with people, you can do something, for example, like open book, running the job open book. So doing like cost plus. So let's say we said, Kazy, I know you, I trust you, vice versa. You want me to come in and do this project. Why don't we be transparent? All of the invoices for materials, for labor, everything, you can see it. We're going to cost control the whole job. And then I'm happy to make 10%, 15% on top of that, yeah? That's fine. And a lot of builders are probably willing to do that. They maybe have to be a little bit open-minded. But if I just go and price a job at 15% markup, 10% markup, that gets very risky for me because you know the game, yeah. Things can go wrong. Things will go wrong. And some things are going to take longer than expected, just cost you more in labour or materials. So as a builder, you have to protect your margin. So I know, for instance, I priced a job for you before a couple of years back. I don't even think
I don't know if we want to talk about that price, do we?
But let's say when I'm dealing with clients, usually not developers, and I want to make a 30% margin. Sometimes that doesn't hit. Sometimes, I go and make 40% margin. Sometimes it's going to be 20%. Sometimes it might even end up being 15%. So for developers, they have no interest in paying a builder to go and make potentially 40% margin. But like I say, it comes down to relationships. If you can form a strong relationship and do it in a slightly unorthodox way, something a little bit different, like an open book thing, I think it can work. You can have a good relationship. But yeah, I think it kind of comes down to that. Builders want to protect their margin, just mainly on the risk side.
I feel like there's a lot of different reasons why people have issues sometimes with builders or finding the right builder for them. The starting point, which I think you touched on, is over-negotiating. I think property developers, often business people as a whole, we often think that if we can squeeze every last penny out of something, that's how you get the best deal. But one thing I've learned in business personally is the cheapest price isn't always the best price. And if you can build a relationship that's win-win and can allow for longevity, you're a lot likely to have better results in the long term. When you're dealing with, new clients, what's the process like? Because I know I speak to a lot of new developers, right? And they, they're like straight away, right, I've seen something at auction. I want to bring my builder out. I want to, but they end up bringing you out to like 2 or 3 projects that they haven't even had an offer accepted yet. How do you navigate that?
I think if you're in the building industry, you have a good idea of what things are going to cost, like upfront. So you don't necessarily need to bring them to site. And obviously, the more projects you do as a developer, you're going to get a bit of experience on what to look out for yourself as you're walking around, where to raise attention. For instance, if there's damp or if there's an issue on the roof, you'll at least be able to spot something to get good photos, videos, and send those over to your builder. But I think just most builders can give you a very reasonable ballpark off of floor plans, images, videos, and like I say, if you can address the few key areas you might have flagged, they can give you an idea pretty easily without having to
I
take
think
too much time
I
out of
think
their
that's
day.
generally my advice as well. At top level, have like a top level idea that realistically, give or take, this refurb is going to cost me between 80 to £100,000. If the deal stacks at that price point and you get an offer accepted, then you bring your builder in to dot your I's, cross your T's, and make sure that you haven't missed out on any maybe major expenses that can go unforeseen. For someone that's also like a builder, but also in the development space, when viewing a property, what are maybe 5 things that you like always look out for when you go to view a property to make sure you're not going to miss out on any unforeseen costs?
First one's always the structural side. So cracks, you're looking for cracks or movement within the house. Has anything dropped when you're looking
How
around?
big does a crack have to be before it scares you?
It depends. It depends where it is as well. So I think as soon as you can start seeing through the crack and it's more than just a hairline, if it's going from the bottom of the house to the top of the house, you're probably in a bit of trouble. If you see a crack just around a window or something like that, you can probably start, it depends. If it's down low in the house, you're in a bit more trouble. If it's higher up and you can see it's above a window or something, it's probably going to be a lot, it's going to be a little easier to rectify.
But if you can put your finger in it, it's probably not a
Yeah,
great
you're
sign.
probably in a little bit of trouble. But the thing is around, like for instance, South London, there's a lot of movement in the house. So just because there is cracks, like none of these things scare me. It's just you're trying to be aware of them because there might be cost implications. It might be something a little bit more involved that you just need to be aware of. It's going to also give you some negotiating power potentially. But around South London, you know yourself, I'm sure there's a lot of movement. So half the houses you go in and you put a marble on the floor, it go tearing down the other side of the house, right? Because just the ground makeup. So it doesn't necessarily need to put you off. You just need to be aware. And then again, you need to take plenty of photos, videos from the outside of the house, the inside of the house. If you have a good relationship with a builder that works in the area, they're probably going to know. They might be able to pinpoint, what the issue potentially is going to be up front.
So you got structural issues as number one. What else are things that you look out for that could cost you extra money?
You need to look at the roof. Roof is always a big thing because if you're not planning to redo a roof and then you get hit with that bill, it's going to significantly hit your profit margins.
I feel like roofs are a weird place. I think like for ages, roofs were expensive and they started to come down a lot in price to replace the roof. And then I'm finding they've gone back up again recently.
It is. Everything's gone back up as well. Roofers earn good money, first of all.
Yeah.
The timbers have gone up. So if you have to replace a full roof, you're in trouble. If there's a few broken tiles and that type of thing, you're okay. But so you need to look at a roof in 2 places. One from the outside of the house and 2 from inside the loft. So you need to see is the timbers and the actual structure of the roof. If that's gone and that's damaged, then again, it's going to be a lot bigger expense. But don't be put off by a few broken tiles.
Roofs in general, we like to try and give people as much information as possible. What would you say is kind of an average lifespan of a roof?
Depends what type of roof it is, to be honest with you.
So we're talking like pitched roof, slate tiles.
To put an exact number on it is too hard. I wouldn't want to say and just be incorrect, but I think like you can get a good, 30 years on a roof, a good roof, well done, and you can still have, you might have a bit of wear and tear, but you can still be standing strong.
Yeah, roofers are the bane of my life. Do you know what it is about roofers? Like realistically, I'm not going to get up there and check their work. So there's a trust thing to start with.
Yeah, massively.
Number 2 is you don't need a roofer until it's an emergency. Because you never know you need a roofer until your roof starts leaking or until there's an issue.
Yeah.
So I think over time, roofers have probably been my hardest trade to get a consistent roofer that I know, like, and trust. So if you're watching this, by the way, and you're a great roofer and you cover South London, we have big jobs, we have small maintenance jobs, make sure you hit us up because we're always looking for great roofers.
There we are. I've got some good ones that work for me full time as well,
amazing.
To be fair, which is good. And then obviously services and windows, I'd say, are the other services and windows, something that sometimes people don't look at. Sometimes people don't realize you need to make sure there is actual central heating in the property, and be aware of that. You need to understand if the electrics, again, just take a picture of, to be honest, a lot of the time taking a picture of the fuse board and of a few sockets and the lights in the property without dropping them off if you're not going to do that, it's probably not recommended if you're not an electrician. But you'll probably gauge an idea if you send it to an electrician. So yeah, the plumbing, the electrics, the windows,
structurals and roof. I think that's a good
that's
5
it.
to double
Yeah,
check, because I
yeah.
always say, like, you know, you can go and look at stuff top level, and when we're doing, like, you know, a lot of the developers that we speak to are doing quite small scale refurbs, but they know roughly where their price point's going to be, and it might be around 50,000, 60,000 pounds for your refurb. But the second you need to replace all your windows, if they can't be casement windows and they've got to be timber sash,
Yeah.
that might be an extra 15,000. If, like you touched on, you were talking about central heating and you were buying this property that was run down, derelict, maybe really dated, and you just forgot to check if there was even a gas collection. Now they've taken out all of the subsidies from new suppliers and things like that. So you might again be looking at £10,000 by the time you've done all of the groundworks to get a new connection in.
Yeah, I think the thing is that I don't know if you find this as well, but a lot of people just seem to have magic numbers in their head. So a lot of people, for some reason, will just walk into a property if it needs everything doing. Typical South London property, they just got like 100k in their head or 50k in their head, and it's just like they think, yeah, okay, there's a lot of work, so buy it for 500, spend 100 on it. Yeah, I should make 100 after everything, you know. And it's they just don't break things down. Like you're saying, have a checklist of every single thing. So your windows, your plumbing, your electrics, your plastering, your flooring, the structural side, the roof. Just have a checklist and go through and just tick off. Have I looked at this? Have I taken photos? Have I got videos? Who do I need to send this to? Because otherwise people just kind of magic these numbers, and then all of a sudden you get hit with a 10 grand bill here, 10 grand bill here, and all of a sudden your profit's gone quite quickly. And that happens often in the building game if you're...
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, builders notoriously don't really ever have any good news for me. Like, I can't think of the last time a builder's called me and said, oh, you know what? Got some great news.
Yeah.
Just found out, like, you know, because we're assuming, and I think maybe that's where the disconnect between builders and developers come in.
Yeah.
We assume everything will be okay. We're maybe like, we have a natural sense of false hope that I'm sure the joists will be fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure all the walls won't be blown. So then when we get the call from the builder saying, yeah, your joists, like, you know, basically wherever that bathroom was and the roof was, they're all completely shot. They've all got to come out. By the way, the plaster's shot. That wall's got to go back to brick.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably why we don't have the best relationship, because you don't really generally have much good news for us.
No. But I think it's just manage expectations. So like a contingency, and I always say to people I'm working with, depending on the project, I'd advise them on where they need the most contingency. So for example, if we're building an extension, you know, there's a high chance something could go wrong in the ground. Probably 1 in 3 jobs, there's a variation and addition somewhere in the ground if we're building an extension.
Oh, see that word you just said there, yeah? Variation and addition.
Yeah.
That word is like, oh, it's a pain
Comes with
point.
a bit of pain for
It's
you.
a pain point to developers and investors. But we're going to get there. But just remind me. So talk to me, what kind of things can come up? Because I think it's a common saying that they say, like, in the building trade, you're not really out of trouble till you got out of the ground.
Exactly that.
So when you are doing rear extensions, you're talking about foundations, what type of issues do people tend to face?
All sorts, to be honest with you. The first one is just be aware, and again, this is things that come with experience. If on the drawings the architect have put like 1 meter deep foundations, I'd always allow that they're going to be deeper than that, at least 1.5 most of the time. The building control come out, and that's the thing. When it's building control, it's out of our hands. It's not us. We're not the bad guys. Blame building control for your variations, yeah? Because they'll come out and they say, no, need to go deeper. We've had it with it to go like 2.2, 2.5 meters deep before. It's ridiculous.
I've got some stories about I've had, like, we've gone from, like, I think, meter to them saying, okay, 2 meters, them saying, actually, because there's not a root barrier in place, that you're going to have to go for like a raft foundation. To looking at the raft to saying, actually, that's not going to be sufficient. You're going to have to go full piling, but actually, because there's no access for a digger, you're going to have to go hand screw piles. And before you know it, something that you've
What's
costed,
that cost you, 20 grand?
Yeah, we eventually managed to do a deal with the neighbor to remove the tree that was the issue from the like, I can't remember what's it called, the agricultural survey, but I can't pronounce it. But yeah, and remove the tree and end up having to go back to the original designs. But yeah, we would have been in about like 18,500.
Yeah, we've had the same. I had to do pile foundations on a single story extension. We've got it right now. It wasn't on the mapped out plans, and they hadn't gone for a survey up front. So there's literally where the foundations need to go. There's a drain pipe going all the way across, and we have to do a build over thing and put a steel in and that type of stuff. We've had to, if it's neighbouring properties where you have to, the foundations next door aren't good enough, you have to do underpinning. So there's all sorts. We managed to get away with this one, but we had it with a mains electric conduit going through diagonal through a property. Wasn't on any of the plans, on EDF's plans, anything like that. Wasn't meant to be on their property. Weren't even for their house. And initially, they gave two options. One, they had to dig up the road and reroute it that way to the house it's meant to go to. Second one is they could come out and bury it. First price, 45 grand. Second price, 25 grand. And the thing is, obviously, we knew. I said, no, that's not correct. So we fought the battle, and they ended up doing it for free of charge, burying it. But if we weren't involved or you didn't understand, the client would have felt like they have zero option, and it was just going straight across where their main extension was meant to be going. They had no choice. Would have been floating in their house otherwise. Yeah. So like a lot of people probably just go out and pay that 25 grand, but. Yeah, obviously.
It's having the expertise to be able to resolve those types of problems. So talk to me about those swear words you just mentioned. What
Variations.
were they? Variations and
additions.
Now, I think this is probably the biggest bone of contention and I think it comes from a place as developers, we're always acting very quickly. Like a lot of us are, self-employed, smaller, not massive companies where you've got a big admin team in the background. So you see a property, you see a deal, and everything is rush, because finance is expensive, the build's expensive, you may be, everything else, your time is expensive. You're trying to get things done as quickly as possible. So how do you think, working with your mains contract, you can best mitigate having to pay a lot of fees when it comes to variations? Now imagine this. You've just completed on a fantastic property. The renovation plans are buzzing in your head, but then the reality hits. Endless paperwork, slow bank transfers, and confusing accounting. That's where Tide changes the game. It's more than just a bank account, it's your all-in-one business toolkit. You can incorporate your company with ease, send invoices and get paid instantly, and track expenses effortlessly, further allowing you to save for your next big project with competitive interest rates. Tide takes the stress out of managing your finances so you can focus on what you do best, building a successful property portfolio. Which is why you should download the Tide app today and open a free business current account with the link in my description. Use the discount code PROPERTYBYKAZY50 and you'll receive £50 cashback when you spend £100 on your new Tide card. That's PROPERTYBYKAZY50 and you'll receive £50 cashback when you spend £100 on your new Tide card. Now back to the video.
Everything just needs to be crystal clear. The one area you need to ask for to take a little bit more time, I guess, and detail is in just the estimate that the builder is providing you. If it's going to be a fixed price and not take the other route, then it needs to be a clear estimate. You need to have clear exclusions, what's included and what's not included, just as importantly, so that everyone's on the same page. And this is where, again, it comes down to trust, because builders have seen it. So same as what I just said to you, I'd say to clients, I'll say, listen, if you're in the ground, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 of our jobs is going to be a variation. So prepare for that. And I always say, look, let's have a bigger contingency for this part of the build. And same if you're in the loft, like some structural stuff, let's have a bigger contingency there. If we get out of the ground, all is good. Let's start thinking about how can we do obviously a lot of higher end stuff. How can we now put that money to some bespoke joinery or things, so that at the start, you don't need to make that decision. So it doesn't feel like we're taking something away from you, but it's a nice, once we're out of the ground, you was prepared for the worst case. Now we've come out with the best case. You can start allocating that money elsewhere. So it's all around being upfront, transparent, managing expectations. Builders know full well there's going to be variations and additions. So it's just about having that conversation and them actually advising you and being transparent.
Yeah. I feel like the thing is with variations, sometimes I just think, like, for want of a better word, those people feel like you're taking a piss here, aren't you? Because it's like, it's just random stuff. And it's like, I know if it was the other way, right? Like, I know if I was like, right, I'm going to start with, I'm just going to fit carpets. It's going to be cheaper than fitting like hardwood flooring. And so we're going to have a certain price. But if I say I want to go from carpets to hardwood flooring, there's going to be a price increase. And I get that. But what I find is, even when I say I want to go from hardwood flooring to carpets, there's still a price increase for a variation. And I think that's where we end up getting a little bit frustrated. But I think from a developer side, I just say exactly what you said. You've got to be as clear as possible. And I wanted to ask you about my process to see what you felt like in terms of
Yeah, go for it.
enacting on the other side of the table. For me, if I'm like tendering a project for works, rather than go and get loads of people to come out and have to fill out like and create their own quote and their own sort of costing and appraisal, which takes a lot of time for them. And also then it's not very clear because you're not necessarily comparing apples for apples and oranges for oranges because everybody's quoting different things. I build out my own scope and schedule of works that's like basically just I'm doing this, put a number in here, I'm doing this, put a number in here, and put in my overall number, which means when I'm comparing quotes, it's very clear in terms of what I'm getting across the board.
And do you do that, or do you have an architect do that?
So I haven't, what I'll do is, so say for example, it's something that requires planning. We'll have the initial plans that will go through for planning. We will then get our architects, pick up a drafting, who will then go and do our building control plans to make sure we've got all of the structural stuff that we need. And depending on the size of the job, if it's something like just a straightforward refurb, that's probably where we'd stop with the plans. If it's something that's larger, like a flat conversion, like some stuff that I've sent over to you, we'd probably get what we call like full stage 4 planning, where it's construction drawings as well as like the M&E pack as well. So you know exactly where things are going. But either way, there would be an appendix to say as per like appendix A, which are the drawings. But then in terms of the schedule of works, it would have like a breakdown in terms of prelims. This is what we require. Like, you know, construction works, like this is what we require for first fix, breakdown of like exactly what we're going to be needing in terms of first fix for electrics, for plumbing, for where, if we're going to need a part replaster, an entire replaster, we break down everything. But then my favorite part is like my M bit, which is like, for the avoidance of doubt, me, the client, will be buying the bathroom suite, all of the joinery, all of the ironmongery, like locks, handles, hinges, be buying all of the floor coverings, you know, be buying the tiles, and make it very clear exactly what I'm buying. So for the avoidance of doubt, if it's not in here, it should be assumed the contractor's buying it. But if you've got any questions, obviously let us know, or if there's anything that you want to make amendments to. But that's kind of how how would you find that dealing with that as a builder?
That's a good process. You got to remember, even though you think the builder's on the bad side, we want it as easy. We don't want it to be unforeseen. So our side, variations can be a pain in the arse a lot of the time anyway. It can give you delays when you're meant to start the next job. Sometimes it just causes more headaches. Sometimes you might see a higher price, but because there is lots of variations often that we just deal with and we just sort, and there's a cost to that. So maybe sometimes when there is something we actually price for, it's a little bit higher, so it looks maybe a slight bit more unreasonable. But I think that process is good because it's clear. So something you picked up on there is the drawings. The more detail in the drawings, the better, right? For both parties. So sometimes just spending a little bit more money on first of all, a good architect. And second of all, just on the building reg drawings, the more detailed drawings, because that gives a specification on different things. Different architects will go to different detail, but like specing the size of the insulation and just specing the size of the timbers and that type of thing. So then there really is no kind of movement to say, oh, we didn't know what size, so we only priced for 6x2, now we're putting in 7x2 and this type of thing, you know. So detailed drawings, scope of work, so they can actually price off something, so you know nothing's going to get missed. But your experience, for someone that's less experienced, they wouldn't probably get an architect to do the scope of works for them up front.
No, definitely. I think that's something that we have, like, so we always look at resources, like things that people have to use over and over again when we're working like with slightly newer developers or emerging developers within the PBK community. All of these like ideas of templates from scopes of work that they can see and look at and refer to, particularly like if it's for a project that where the build cost was 700,000, if you're scaling that back down to a 40k refurb of a studio flat, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, I don't need this, I don't need that, but let me work it through. And then I've got like quite a clear and concise work through to effectively be your guide throughout the project. There was actually a question that came up recently in the group, and I thought it would be interesting to ask. I don't generally include like time-related penalties for completion. Is it something that you've come across in your scope, and how do you feel as a builder?
Yeah, so there's an option to do that on like a JCT contract or a Reba contract. Do you use contracts?
Yes, and just for those that are not familiar, can you just define like what is a JCT contract versus Reba, etc.?
Yeah, so they're basically industry standard contracts. If something does happen and you go to court, the judge knows what those contracts and seen them 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever. So it will stand a lot stronger than your own contract. Now, when I first started, I used to have only using my own contract, really, typically. And I'd always fight my battle and say, yeah, this is the contract. It was still obviously fair, but naturally there was things that just swung in my favor. And if you have a good reputation, you can stand by your points, and it kind of is what it is, right? But now I actually use the JCT mainly for the reason of if something does happen, especially with not to get too political, but the court system nowadays, and I know people that spend a lot of money going to court and can go on and on and on. I'd rather walk in if there was ever an issue with, here, you know, this contract inside out, and help me deal with it. But to answer your question, time penalties, I don't think it's ever a good idea. I think to be honest, even with contracts, right, there's only so much a contract's going to protect you from. At the end of the day, you need to have that relationship. That's the number one thing, is to have that relationship, the trust there between yourself and the builder, and vice versa. Like I always say to the clients, the contract's here, we're going to do this paperwork up front, and then we need to never look at it again. That's the ideal situation. We don't want to keep visiting a contract and working off of that. That's just never going to set you up for a good working relationship. So yeah, I don't look. Builders want to get in and out as quick as they can. They will make more money if they get out quicker. So it's never their intention to run over. So you could put something in about people having to be on site daily or something like that. I don't think that's unreasonable. But time penalties, it's not for me. I wouldn't take a job on for it personally. Yeah, so you're probably limiting, like, let's say I'm placing myself as a good company to work with and a high-end company, trustworthy company. You're going to shut yourself off from working with us because I just say we don't need to do that. So
I think that has been what I've found as well. That is, if you're overly restrictive, then naturally it's not like people are not worried that, you know, it's, oh, I'm a bad builder and I'm going to take ages. But realistically, it's like it's a strange starting point of negotiation. And as you mentioned, builders want to get out of the project as quick as possible because of the time value of money. The longer you're on site, the less money you can earn throughout the calendar year. And I think if you try and be overly protective, what you end up with is you end up paying more as the client off the front end. Because if you tell people like, well, if you're a week late straight away, I'm going to penalize you £2,000 a week, until they're just going to think, okay, well, I'm going to build that into the cost, that I'm going to add on extra costs up front to protect themselves.
100%.
And I think that's why when people are negotiating, it's important to negotiate like strongly, but also fairly. Because for two reasons. Number one is if you negotiate too harshly, you end up sometimes backing yourself into a corner of a higher price point. But number two, like when we talk about the contracts, terms have to be deemed as fair to be deemed as enforceable. So I could put in my contract that, you know, if you don't finish by the 7th of December, then you owe me £1 million. But a judge is going to look at that and say, that's not really, that's not a fair clause because it's not unilateral. It doesn't go both ways. There's no give and take in it as well.
Yeah, actually now, like there has to actually be a cost, which if you're doing property development, there is, because you can argue the rent, the lack of rent, and finance costs. But like if you're just doing someone's home and they're not renting, there's no actual cost. You can't actually implement that now anymore. Because there's no reason, they're not losing £2,000 a month, so they can't charge you £2,000 a month. But just on the negotiations as well, I think, like I always have a thing personally where I negotiate products, not services, because I've just come to find that you negotiate a service, you think you're winning, you're not going to win. You're going to get lesser service, or you're going to get the cost put in another way, or whatever it might be. But services are built off of trust. Products, if I was to sell you this mic now and it's here, you can't really do much. If I knock you down 500 quid, it is what it is. You can't change the mic all of a sudden. But if we just are negotiating a mentorship or a service, how do I know if I'm winning? Do you see what I mean? Because in the back of your head, you're like, all right then, mate, yeah, fine, knock £1,000 off. And then 2 weeks down the line, you're not prioritizing me, or you're not going to put the same effort in, or whatever it is. So I just always think negotiate products, fine. But not necessarily services. There's also a thing to say, when you're doing negotiating, it doesn't just have to be money necessarily. So like, you need to think of, you already mentioned scope of works and not getting builders to price. Make it a bit more attractive to builders as well. So look, I'm not going to ask you to do a full estimate up front. Look, I'm going to give you a scope of works to make it really easy to price. It could be, if you've seen their work, you know they do good work. Sometimes it's just when you get into the later stages, just giving them a little bit of flexibility and freedom around how some of the stuff's coming together, if that makes sense. So, for instance, if we're doing a job now for a client's home, everything has to be bang on exactly how they want it, or how the interior design, or so you can sometimes put something in and have to take it back out, when really, if it was me doing my own development, that would be staying there. It looks good, it's fine, it's just not, it's 100 mil off for some reason, someone made a mistake and it's not as per the drawings. You know, just stuff like that. It's going to make the builder's life so much easier if you gave them a bit of freedom, as long as the overall result's going to come out looking good. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think, look, we did a few client projects a while ago, and I said, yep, this is not for me. I can't do client projects. I think I did.
Oh, like, you done the build projects for
Yeah. So we used to do we used to have like a construction team that obviously worked for us full time, but between projects we do bits. And I think like the nail in the coffin was when we had what was it? So you got obviously like the copper pipes coming out the floor for the radiators, and they were the ones that are like, you know, pre-finished. They look really nice. And then he sent me this picture of like him with a ruler, and I was like, oh, what's this? Like, 'cause we finished the project. It's like a month later, and he's like, oh, I've noticed like basically where the pipe comes out of the floor, it's away from the wall like 15 mil, but where it goes into the radiator, it's 20 mil. So I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, like, you know, I just would have thought. And I'm saying, okay, so what should we do? And this is like, yeah, well, so we fixed it, but it's like I had to go and dig up the floors, go and get replacement tiles, which are not in the same like batch number because it's a tiled floor, just for 5 mil. Like for context, that's that much of a pipe that's against the radiator that I don't think anyone's seeing. The job was done like to a really high standard. He loved it. Like I got referrals off the back of it, but I just thought, yeah, this isn't necessarily.
And so that's where I've come to learn, working for clients, like not developers, clients' homes. We are a company where we say everything has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, we'll change it. So if that was out, we'd change it. No questions asked, right? Because it just gives us a clear definition of everything has to be perfect, bang on, level, etc. But with that, we charge a lot of money. We're expensive. We pay,
I know.
and we have good guys on very good money. We have management. We have project managers, senior interior designer, etc. So like we charge top end money. So it's all factored in. Whereas if you're a developer and you want that service, it's like, fine, but a business, they're only going to last if over a long period of time, they're not losing money, right? So those mistakes, they're just going to get essentially build onto the next people and the next people over time. They're going to get factored in as a contingency into that project. So that's what I mean by just giving them a little bit of freedom and flexibility and not getting them to rip up a floor, because the next project, they're just going to have to up their prices.
Yeah, because of just in case.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting now, obviously, you were naturally like doing like high-end like refurb and redevelopment projects of people's like primary residences. You're now more transitioning into doing development yourself. How have you had to mentally pivot when it comes to looking at jobs and managing costs when you're doing, because you mentioned you got really good guys on like good price points because they're used to dealing with multi-million-pound homes. Are you going to be able to use the same teams? Like, how are you going to transition?
So no, yeah. So there has been some shifts in mindset needed. Like it is a divide, but it's quite good. It's like now I get it from the other side, and that's why it's just different. There's so many to get things perfect, where those mistakes that you just mentioned do not happen. Well, of course, sometimes there's always a mistake, but overall, there's a lot more that goes into it. So, yeah, I just look at properties different now. I think in terms of the guys, no, I think there's some crossover, but we've got different guys that I can use that ultimately can get the job done. To be honest, we have people that are presentable, so they need to be able to speak to the client well. They need to give off a professional feel. They need to be obviously very, very good and high attention to detail. They need to have a lot of experience in working on high-end projects, doing our own stuff.
I've seen some of your guys installing like bathrooms with white gloves on. Yeah, very high-end.
Whereas for our own stuff, I don't care if you're turning up in a tracksuit or you're a little bit rough around the edges, or,
it's different.
That sort of stuff I couldn't really
You're
care.
the client, so
exactly.
You can decide
so as long as you're still reliable, you're going to do a good job. But with that, obviously, we don't have to pay the top end money. There's less input on management, so the project management side and the interior design side and just the operations. There's less of that needed. So I think there's also just the approach in which I take. So my kind of route to doing it, unless we do a high end one, is like super high end one, is go cheap on expensive and expensive on cheap. So what I mean by that is, for instance, on sockets or switches, I'm never going to put in white plastic on our own property development. Just spend a bit extra, go brush brass, because it's a cheap product. So even if I'm paying 4 times the price of plastic, it's, in the grand scheme, it's going to cost me an extra couple £100.
Yeah, exactly.
Things
and
like
it's visual.
exactly
Well.
sink, taps, the worktop. Just spend a little bit extra, a couple £100 extra. Have an allowance depending on the size of the project. 2K, 3K, just so that you can do paneling in a room downstairs, paneling in the master bedroom, brush brass sockets and switches, slightly more expensive tap and sink and worktop. But then on like the kitchen cabinets and stuff, we could get them like, we just put in a nice looking kitchen, shake style kitchen. I think it costs us like £2,000 for the whole kitchen, and it looks good. So yeah, you don't want to, if you start going expensive on kitchen, like in our clients, we do bespoke kitchen, it bloody costs you £50,000. You're not going to start doing that on a development. You can literally put a kitchen for £2,000, nicer worktop, nicer tap, couple £100 on each, and it's going to look a high-end finish. Light fittings, just, spend 30 quid on a light fitting, 40 quid instead of just a standard pendant.
Yeah, get
and
down
it's
to
just
Daniel.
yeah, exactly. Like
B&M, some
you can
good
just
deals over there.
Spend double, triple, quadruple the price, but on the cheaper products, and in turn, it's only going to cost you an extra couple thousand throughout the project. But then go cheaper on, not cheap, but cheaper on things like the kitchen, some of the bathroom suites, like a bath and stuff. You don't need to go crazy on that stuff. Yeah, fixtures and fittings, really.
Nice. In terms of going back to some of your like higher end projects, what's some of the most enjoyable projects you've worked on?
So we've got we're doing 2 really interesting ones at the minute. One's going to be on TV, Channel 4, Extraordinary Extensions with Tiny Temper.
I was supposed to be on that.
Was you?
Yeah. But then I cancelled doing the extension because this was like COVID.
Okay.
Bill cost went up. Like the original bill cost was like 300 grand, and then I got it back, and it was like post COVID, it was like 550. I said, yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
But go on, sorry.
So that one's going to be really cool. Obviously, it's going on TV. They're filming. It's obviously a high end finish. We're doing loft conversion, 2 extensions, like vaulted ceiling, exposed timbers. And we're doing all of our handmade kitchen, bespoke joinery, etc. So that's a really cool one to be involved with. And then we're doing another really it's massive. It was a 9-bedroom house. I think they paid like 3.7 for it. In total, they're probably spending around about £1 million. Same thing, lots of bespoke joinery, handmade kitchen, chef's kitchen, doing the whole house top to bottom renovation. So that's going to be, there's a lot of detail, like at the minute we're ordering like hand painted wallpaper with coming from like China. That's like super high end. We got today delivery of tiles, £10,000 tiles going in the principal bathroom. So we're working with some super high end products. That's going to be cool. They're exciting.
Nice. And then I guess in the industry as a whole, I wondered how you found the impact of Brexit, availability of trades, and how that's transitioned in recent years.
Yeah, it had a big, obviously like a lot of industries, but especially in construction as well, and hospitality, I guess it had a big impact. I mean, like for example, Polish, Eastern Europeans and Poland specifically are known for really good work rate. Polish more so than some of the other Eastern Europeans, where actually really good quality work, high attention to detail. The Poland economy now is absolutely thriving. It used to be pretty weak, the economy, and not a lot of jobs or building going on. So that's why there's a lot of Polish people here. In COVID and Brexit, a lot had to go back, and they've not returned. We know a lot of guys that have done that. And so on one side, it makes it very hard for us to get labour and good labour. But on the flip side, it means there's a shortage of guys to do the work. So there's a lot of demand for the work out there if you can solve the problem of finding people.
Do you think there's like not enough people like at younger ages going into trades?
Massively. I have seen the stats. I don't have them off the top of my head, but yeah, there's a big decline of people going into trades. And I've seen it in America, like Texas, like electricians out there are earning like, I don't know, 500 quid a day and stuff like that now because there's such a shortage. So I think we're going to get that here.
Yeah, I think, look, when I speak to people and maybe that they're looking at what to get into, or maybe like some younger gens that don't necessarily have the direction, I'm like, look, just get a trade. Like whether it's like going to be like a plumber's apprentice or a sparky's apprentice and going to learn, because most of my plumbers earn 6 figures a year. Like
Yeah,
even ones doing like odd jobs, like, you know, and doing bits and bobs. And I've seen people that have gone from maybe living a very different, not, you know, quite an unscrupulous life to doing their plumbing stuff. Like as a friend of mine, Carl Wilson Dennis, or Diz, as people know him as, and he's done massively well in terms of like, even in his like late 30s, early 40s, to just transitioning, getting into learning a trade, and it like just turning his entire like life around as well, which is amazing.
100%. I see it because of the bloody wage bill that I pay out to all these guys on a full net. But I started as an electrician. That's what I
Okay,
done.
nice.
Apprentice electrician. Was doing good, and then I was trying to learn other things. So I was doing some tiling. I was just helping doing building, labouring and stuff whenever I could, evenings, weekends. And then yeah, that's what allowed me to get the money behind me to start my first business.
Yeah.
Then when I quit, I set this up straight away. So yeah, quite quickly got off the tools, but it gave me the experience, the knowledge, working on site, a lot of contacts. So yeah, I went from electrician apprentice, having a building company, now being able to own developments. I think that's kind of the transition that a lot of tradesmen want to do. And you certainly can do it.
I think because you build up a contact base of people within the industry, it's that. And I always say that when you're starting your first project, if you're transitioning from being on the tools to being a developer, you're naturally going to get the best rates for your first project. Like if you're a tradie and you mess up your first project, it's like, come on, man. Because I know you've already got the plastering at half price, the everything, the electrics, the plumbing, the central heating, everything you've got on a deal. But what I would say to those that are, and I get a lot of people reach out to me that are in the trades, whilst you can do that for your first project, you can't rely on that to make a deal work. Because what I see a lot of people do is they'll be like, oh, but I can, like, because my dad's a builder, I can get it done for half the price and I can do this. And I'm like, but then if realistically you're saving 20, 30 grand on the build, but the deal itself is only making 40, 50, you'd be better off just doing the build for somebody else. So you make half the amount of money with none of the overhead, none of the risk, none of the money in. So I think it's just finding that balance between doing it as a safety net to start with, but then also really understanding deal appraisal and making sure there is the necessary margins. You're not just getting paid for your time and your connections.
Exactly. I think like on your own house, if you're doing your own house up, use all of the, you know, have that strategy of I can get him to help me with this, I can get my dad to help me on that. If you're doing like this property developments, then for me, I just have that in my pocket. Should something mess up, I don't call in I'm not going to call the favors in on the first one. I'm not going to call it in on each one. I want everyone to earn good money, earn their fair share, their day rate. But then I know that worst case scenario, something happens, I can call any of my suppliers, I can call any of my tradesmen and say, listen, something's happened here, the mistakes happen, need a bit of a favour. And I've got plenty of favours where people will jump on, help us out because we need to save costs for whatever reason. So just have it in the back of your pocket in case something goes wrong down the line. But people will do you a favour, probably a big favour like that once, and then you call them a second time, they're going to think, hold on, mate. Like,
and not only that, it's also like, your job's going to be at the bottom of their priority. Even if they like you, it's like, look, I know I'm not getting paid here, so I'll do it when I want. Exactly. And there's the time value. We spoke about labor costs going up. COVID though, like material prices were going crazy to the point that Screwfix didn't even want to guarantee, like they didn't want to have catalogs anymore because prices were changing on a weekly basis. How have you seen prices like for materials over the last year? Have they stabilized? Are they still rising?
So last year they stabilized and some only some slightly dropped. Now back in Jan, all the suppliers bang back up on average, probably about 10% up. Just now in January, actually got a meeting later today with Juson's coming in to negotiate the prices and fix them in for the year, funny enough. But yeah, look, in COVID, I know one of our suppliers, for instance, they import tiles and stuff like that. I think they were paying about £4,000 a container, £4,000 a container to ship them over. And then in COVID, it reached up to a peak of about 19, 20 grand for that container. That's just on shipping costs. Like, it's wild. So the spike was just crazy. You've got things now like all these wars in Ukraine and Russia, all that sort of stuff affects it. But at the minute,
glass, timber, steel.
Timber's been going up at the minute. Start last year, it was steel that was going crazy. So they all kind of have their ups and downs, but it's something that on the build side and development side, you need to be aware of. You need to understand now, since COVID, people most of the time have in their contract to say, we're not guaranteeing these price, you know, if the prices spike or increase, because it sent so many companies under, especially the bigger companies that couldn't take the hit. that you just, again, you need to have that in the back of your mind, that you have to have a bit of contingency on your materials. Sometimes it's a wise move if you've got the money to do a bigger order up front, and sometimes at least negotiate the prices, lock them in for, even if it's 30 days, 60 days with a supplier, or if you can get things on order like steels and some of the main timbers, just do that.
Particularly depending on site. Like if you've got a big site where you can build out storage facilities and you're not building out just to the parameters of your site, that's always good. All right. I like a game. Like always like games. I try and think of a game.
Go on, let's do it.
For you now, we're gonna actually, do you know what we're gonna use? We're gonna use our mate Jake as our case study. Yeah,
go on.
We're gonna use our mate Jake. So Jake is doing, for those who don't know, Jake is a member of the PBK community, friend of yours, come on the podcast with you guys, and he's recently found his first property development deal, which is a 1-bedroom flat in South London. He's going to be converting to a 2-bed. So there's going to be a number of works he's going to do there. And we're going to be thinking, for him, we're going to play a game called How Much Does It Cost? Yeah? So just for you, I know you're not fully versed, I'll give you an idea. The flat itself is about, call it 55 square meters.
Yeah, I see it.
He's
funny enough. Yeah. He's just got the keys now. He's there now.
Oh, amazing. So he's live and direct. He could call himself a developer now officially.
Yeah.
So he's doing that. So starting point, we're going to start with the rip out. So getting all of the old fixtures and fittings. How much do you think he's going to pay for that in this project?
I think he's probably going to pay, again, it depends which route you take. If you're going company or you're going individual tradesman, that's the thing.
Less for him, I know that because of the size of the project, and I know that he wants to get sort of stuck in and do more, he's going to self-manage individual trades.
Yeah. I think he'd probably look in a region, including getting rid of the rubbish and stuff, something like $3,000.
Again, I think that's fair. I think I'd be about the same. I think we're agreed.
Till the variations come.
Exactly, till the variations come. Okay, number 2. He's going to be going for a new central heating system. So let's assume he's going for a brand new central heating system.
All pipes and everything, or just new boiler and
all pipes and everything. So we're just assuming that it's all pipes. You could pick copper or plastic, whatever takes your fancy, and we'll just call it like a middle of a range, like ideal boiler. So what do we reckon? Labour and materials for that, and just standard white rads.
Yeah, so probably about 7.
At 7, okay, fair. I reckon white rads I would have gone a little bit lower, but it's fair. I think we're not too far out. Okay, then second thing is he's also got to do a complete rewire. So that's new fuse board, complete rewire of the entire property. And let's just assume he's not going for spotlights apart from in the bathroom, so just standard pendant lights. Yeah,
it's pretty easy there to be able. They're not going for spots or anything. Probably about 5, 6.
Fair. Now, let's say he's got to replaster that entire property.
Yeah.
What do we reckon on the replaster for that entire property? So not back to brick, just skim.
Just skimming it all. So you've got it's upstairs for listeners. So you've got the stairs coming up as well.
Exactly.
And high ceilings there as well, because it's a Victorian style property. So probably about 4.5, something like that.
I think fair. See, look, we're not fighting right now. See, look,
we
can get towards the end of the pod and we're building a relationship. That's good stuff.
A tip that is not always, but a tip for people listening as well. Typically, if you're skimming, plastering and decorating usually comes in about the same price. If so, like I'd probably go about the same for the decorating as well.
Fair.
Depending on things like, depending if it is just skimming or if it's bonding and that type of thing. And on the decorating side, depending on like woodwork, something that can make quite a big difference in colours and stuff like that. Okay,
so final 2 questions. So what about just he's got a single bathroom there. It's just going to be a pretty much light for light, but let's assume it's light for light bathroom suite. How much do you reckon to
supply and install? Or?
Let's say supply and install, but we're talking like tops, tiles.
Okay, so nothing crazy.
Yeah.
So probably like 8.
Okay, fair. And kitchen, around the same, bit more, bit less.
So that's what I'm saying. Like if it was us, we could, if you've got the suppliers, we can get nice units for 2, probably 3, couple grand in. So it's probably like 5 or so.
Oh, okay.
But this is what I mean. I understand this side now. Whereas our bathrooms at Pure, last year they were starting at 15k plus VAT. So do you see what I mean? But it's because for a good reason. I couldn't do you a bathroom for 8 grand with Pure, with a higher end and a lot of attention to detail and design and all the rest of it.
All the niches, all the like the grout lines with no sort of no trims, just
so it's and that's where it starts. We've got clients spending like 30 grand on a bathroom. So everything you need to just, as a developer, have a bit of context of what spec things are going to be at, because it does make a big difference, not just in the products. That's what a lot of people think. It's just the products. Oh, I can spend an extra £1,000 or £2,000 on tiles. I'm going to get, but actually the labor that maybe goes with those tiles, because it's herringbone or it's small tiles or whatever, you have to double the labor as well. So, yeah.
No, I think that's good. And I think that what's interesting about that is, although we've spoken about the divide between builders and developers, a lot of the time it's get somebody who you can work with and understands what you're trying to deliver. And I say the same thing whether it's an estate agent. Like, you're way better to have an estate agent that's maybe bought and sold their own house before because they understand the pitfalls. You're way better to have an architect that's maybe done a development because they understand not just from a how to design it to make it look nice, but also what's a functional build as well, because they've been on the other side. And likewise, when you're working with a builder, if you can work with a builder that's done development similar to what you're hoping to achieve, they'll understand that, okay, you've just mentioned all those price points. And I think for the most part, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but we're pretty okay with those price points. But then also, they're the price point for if you're self-managing individual trades and what they cost. If you now want to have somebody who's wholly responsible for all of those things, plus has to add their time, plus has to have their what if, they're going to have their maybe 20% management plus X% contingency and margins. So that's where prices go up. But I think overall, it's just about building good working relationships with people for the long period of time to build those relationships with good builders.
And I think getting your own data could be so useful as well. So right back where we started on the cost plus potential. If you're starting, again, you need to have I can't emphasize enough that you need a good relationship with a builder. I think a lot of just typical old school builders might not really be open to it. So you need someone maybe a little bit more open-minded, because they do this a lot in commercial and bigger properties. You also need the resource to be able to cost control properly. A builder that doesn't have an admin support, they're not going to be able to do it efficiently. But if you don't know exactly, if we did 2-3 projects, obviously you start on one, if it goes well, we do another 1 or 2, and it's completely transparent, open book, you're going to get to understand who the suppliers are, how much everything actually costs. You're going to have all of those spreadsheets, all of those receipts, all of those invoices to see, so that you know that, okay, you did this job with a single story extension. How much did that cost? How many square meters was it? What area was it? You've got your own data. You're not just listening to someone else on the internet. You're not just kind of somewhat guessing. You actually know exactly to the penny how much you spent without any profit. And then you can make judgments moving forward. And you can, if you do that for 2-3 projects, you're going to have different types. You might have one with an extension, one with a loft conversion, one that's just a renovation, or 1 to 2 bed, and you're going to have that data for yourself. So even if you then don't want to do it moving forward, now when you're going in, you're going to understand exactly what goes into it, what materials go into it, how much labor costs, where the best suppliers are, how to get the best deals, and you're going to be in a much better position, just experience-wise, to go into your next developments.
And that's some great advice. For people that want to connect with you, they want to find more about Pure Projects, how can people go and see some of your amazing work?
Yeah, so my personal Instagram and TikTok and stuff's JoeTodd23. Just started a 90-day TikTok challenge, so I don't know when this comes out, but let's see how it's going on by the time this gets released. And then Pure Projects is Pure Projects _, and we've got the podcast as well, the Multipliers Club .podcast, I believe the handles are. So
amazing. Well, we'll make sure we connect you with Joe and Pure Projects. That has been another episode of the PBK podcast. If you've liked it, if you've enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe and like this video, and we'll be back next week with another amazing guest.
Wicked. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, mate.